Did you read the last story? This issue is even more exciting. Welcome to subscribe. Chapter 18, Charlotte's Bloody Diary, a nighttime talk in the laboratory. When the sound of the collapse of the Notre Dame underground palace dissipated in the distance, Isabella's silver dagger was pressed against Adrian's throat. Blood was still dripping from his left arm, and the Arctic coordinates on the chain of his pocket watch were particularly dazzling in the reflection of the stone wall. It was the same pocket watch that Adrian had worn when her father was executed, which she had seen in front of the sarcophagus. "You've long known that my father was an illegitimate son of the Ventrue." Her voice was mixed with the dust of the underground palace. "And you also knew that my mother was a spy sent by the Bruja, right?" Adrian's hand hanging by his side suddenly clenched, his knuckles turning white from the force. He turned and walked towards the hidden compartment of the laboratory. The old wooden boards creaked protestingly under his boots, as if delaying the truth that was about to be revealed. When he turned around again, there was a mottled covered diary in his hand. The name Charlotte White on the cover was reddened by the bloodstains from his fingernails. The halo of the kerosene lamp flickered on the diary. Isabella's gaze first fell on the photo 夹在 the title page. In the yellowed photo paper, the young Adrian stood in the middle, with her father wearing the Ventrue ring on the left and her mother holding a swaddle on the right. On the right shoulder of the baby in the swaddle, a rose-shaped birthmark identical to hers was clearly visible. In the spring of 1890, your mother had just finished the third virus integration experiment. Adrian's voice was like a silverware soaked in ice. Charlotte and she were locked in the same laboratory with the numbers MV and CW respectively, human females, type B blood, the perfect control group for the Ventrue's immortality plan. Isabella's fingertips glided across her mother's face in the photo. Her memory was suddenly pulled back to the cross necklace she had seen at the Bruja stronghold in chapter 11. It turned out that the pendant around the elder's neck was exactly the token that her mother had secretly given to Charlotte in the laboratory. The letter paper that fell out of the diary unfolded, with her mother's handwriting. "Bella's birthmark is glowing. Charlotte said this is proof of the Holy Maiden's bloodline. But why does Adrian's silver dagger always point at us?" When she turned to the last page of the diary, Isabella's breath suddenly stopped. On the yellowed paper, the design drawing of the silver dagger came into view vividly. Each serration of the rose pattern on the handle precisely corresponded to the outline of her birthmark, with a red pen note beside it. "Forged with my ashes, perhaps it can awaken the human side of the Stigmata gene. When the virus roars in her veins, the silverware will hold her from me." Charlotte drew this design before she died. Adrian's fingers stroked the scorched mark on the edge of the drawing. In the winter of 1896, the Ventrue Council discovered the purification gene in her blood and intended to turn her into a living silverware. She engraved the design on a scalpel and stuffed it into the furnace when I was forging the silverware. Those sparks were actually the secret signals she left for you. Isabella's fingertips glided across the unfinished handle on the drawing, and she suddenly remembered the semi-finished product she had seen in the laboratory in chapter 9. It turned out that the curvature of the groove and the direction of the pattern were all designed according to her birthmark before she was born. What made her even more breathless was that on the back of the drawing, written in Charlotte's blood, was, "And these child will be the vessel, Adrian. Don't let the Ventrue's immortality plan destroy her humanity." In the autumn of 1890, your father infiltrated the laboratory. Adrian took out the photo, and on the back were her father's words, "Adrian MV's pregnant. This is our last chance to create the vessel." The scorched mark on the edge of the photo paper was exactly left when the council set the fire that year. In order to destroy the evidence of the half-breed experiment, they almost burned the swaddled Isabella to death. Memories surged like a bloody tide. Isabella remembered the old photo she had seen deep in the medicine cabinet in chapter 3. What Adrian had hurriedly put away at that time was exactly this group photo of 3 people. On her mother's hand in the photo, there was clearly a pattern of the reliquary coordinates identical to the one in the underground palace mural in chapter 7. It turned out that long before she was born, the 2 families had already been tied to the gene chain of the first-generation virus. Charlotte knew she didn't have long to live. Adrian's voice suddenly became hoarse. She begged me to integrate her ashes into the silverware, saying that in this way she could protect you forever, protect this vessel that carried the blood of the Holy Maiden and the virus of the Prince. He took off his wedding ring, and the CW plus MV 1890 engraved inside glowed coldly in the firelight. These were the initials of Charlotte and her mother. The moment Adrian engraved them inside the wedding ring was exactly when the two decided to steal the first generation blood. The fragment of the Holy Scripture of Blood that fell out of the diary landed on the ground. When Isabella picked it up, she found a pattern of the overlapping virus double helix and rose-shaped birthmark drawn on the back with Charlotte's note beside it. The half-breed blood can reconcile the Stigmata gene, but it requires the forging of the silver blood craftsman Adrian. Remember the coordinates where the ice-breaking ship sank in 1462? There lies the key to the first-generation blood. That's why the rats would worship you. Adrian pointed to the embryo diagram on the fragment. Your blood is not a pollutant to the virus, but its mother tongue. The silver moon mark on the back of the neck of the opera singer in 1897, just like your birthmark, is the biological key to opening the reliquary. Isabella's fingers suddenly stung. Her birthmark glowed faintly under the kerosene lamp, reflecting a page soaked in blood in the diary. November 2nd, 1897. MV's child was sent to Paris. Adrian, use your silver dagger to cut a bloody path for her, even if the blade is stained with our blood. Did you approach me because of Charlotte's diary? Isabella suddenly grabbed Adrian's wrist and turned up his cuff to reveal the burn mark. It was the burn from the resonance between the silverware and the virus when he was dealing with the bloodstain on her hand in Chapter 3. This man who had said, "Your father was once my close friend in the Misty Alley Pharmacy," now had the unfinished silver dagger in the laboratory reflected in his eyes. "The first time I saw you at the opera, your blood splashed on the back of your hand." Adrian let her examine his wound. The blue light of the resonance between the stigmata, silver, and the virus illuminated the outline of your birthmark, exactly the same as the rose pattern on Charlotte's design drawing. At that moment, I knew the vessel had awakened. He turned around and took out the unfinished silver dagger. The faintly visible engraving, CW 1896, on the inner side of the handle, Charlotte's initials and the year of her death. When Isabella's fingertips touched the groove, the dagger suddenly buzzed, resonating with her heartbeat, and new engravings emerged on the inner side of the handle. With blood as the bond, the seal is the key to the future vessel. Was it for revenge? Isabella's voice was trembling. For Charlotte, for the glory of the white family that was erased by the Ventru? So you let the Dracula faction pursue me and used my blood to activate the underground palace mural? Adrian paused in his action of polishing the dagger. Sparks splashed on the back of his hand, but they were not as intense as the surging blood in his eyes. In the winter of 1895, the night Charlotte was injected with the first-generation blood, she begged me for two things. One was to forge silverware with her ashes, and the other was to find MV's child. He suddenly stuffed the dagger into her palm. The rose pattern on the handle fit her birthmark perfectly. At that time, I thought revenge meant making the Ventru Council bleed, until I saw the moment when you made the rats stop in the sewer. Your mother's blood had really planted hope in you. The sentry whistle of the Bruja faction came from outside the laboratory, and the barking of the Dracula's mechanical hounds approached from afar. Isabella looked at her mother's gentle eyes in the photo and suddenly noticed that the unfinished silver dagger was reflected in her pupils. It turned out that from the first drop of blood that infected her at the opera, all the encounters were a script already written by the virus double helix. Answer me. She grabbed Adrian's collar but touched the silver chain around his neck. It was the silver chain used to wake her up during the train raid in Chapter 8. Inside the pendant of the chain were engraved the initials of Charlotte and V, looking like two intersecting bloody tear marks in the firelight. Adrian looked down at the bloody liquid on her hair tips, which was the first-generation blood splashed during the collapse of the underground palace just now. Your mother said before she died that the rose-shaped birthmark should not be a curse, but a bridge connecting humans and the blood race. He finally spoke, his voice as light as snow. And Charlotte, she filled her diary with your appearance, saying that if she had a daughter, she would definitely grow up to be like you. The sound of breaking glass came from a distance. The serum soldiers of the Dracula faction were breaking through the defense line of the underground palace. Adrian suddenly tore open the hidden compartment, revealing the hidden forging platform. On it was a half-melted silver block. Exactly the Stigmata silver integrated with Charlotte's ashes in 1896. In March 1897, I bought the sketch of your father's execution on the London black market. He grabbed a charcoal pencil and quickly outlined the execution ground scene on the parchment. He deliberately exposed the location of the reliquary, making the council think they had destroyed the vessel's bloodline. But he injected your blood into the sarcophagus in the Notre Dame underground palace, where the purification gene of the Holy Maiden in 1462 was sleeping. Isabella's gaze fell on the edge of the parchment, and her father's handwriting penetrated the charcoal pencil marks. Adrian, when Bella's birthmark starts to spread, take her to the Arctic. The reliquary under the ice layer needs the resonance between Charlotte's silverware and her blood. She suddenly remembered the scene in Chapter 7 when the mural became dynamic, and the first-generation prince injected blood into the 7 reliquaries, one of which was the one her father had protected with his life. How many more things should I know? Isabella raised the diary. Charlotte's design drawing and her birthmark overlapped in the firelight. For example, why my blood can melt silver bullets, and why Adrian White, a silverware forger of the Ventrue faction, personally executed my father in 1890. Adrian's fingers glided across the blade of the silver dagger. Blood dripped onto the forging platform, actually emitting the same blue light as her blood. Because at that time, I thought he had betrayed Charlotte. He smiled bitterly. Until I saw the blood cells in your body in the laboratory, the double helix structure was self-repairing, exactly the same as the first-generation virus recorded in Charlotte's diary. He suddenly rolled up his sleeve, revealing the brand on his forearm, the silver cross of the Ventrue Council, with the emblem of the rose-shaped birthmark embedded in the center. At the execution ground in 1890, I did stab your father, but the blade of the Stigmata silver dagger was pre-coated with Charlotte's purified blood. He grabbed her hand and pressed it against his chest. Listen, my heartbeat is 3 times slower than that of a human. Since Charlotte died in 1896, I've injected myself with the first-generation blood. Isabella stepped back suddenly, knocking over the microscope on the experimental table. The lens swept over the slide, and her blood cells were devouring the virus particles, while Adrian's blood showed the same silver-white color as when the rats stopped. It was the blood of the silver blood craftsman that could forge Stigmata silver. You've long known that I'm the vessel. She stared at Adrian's healing wound. From the moment you saw that I wasn't infected at the opera, you started calculating how to use my blood to activate the Arctic ice layer. Yes and no. Adrian pressed the wedding ring against her birthmark. Amidst the sound of metal colliding, the double helix pattern and the rose pattern coincided. At first, I wanted revenge to make the Ventrue Council pay with blood for Charlotte's death. But when you made the rats stop in the sewer and lost control to protect the common people on the train, double quotes, his voice suddenly choked. Your mother's blood really retained humanity in you. Suddenly, the stone wall of the laboratory shook, and the mechanical arm of the Dracula faction broke through the wall. Adrian grabbed the silver dagger and stuffed it into Isabella's hand. The rose pattern on the handle was now glowing in sync with her heartbeat. Take the diary and go to the Arctic, he said. On page 37, there is the ice-breaking ship route drawn by Charlotte, and also, before he could finish, a silver bullet from the serum soldier pierced through his shoulder. Isabella watched in horror as he fell. The wedding ring slipped from his fingers, and the engraving inside flickered in the firelight. CW plus MV 1890. Charlotte and her mother, 2 women who had dedicated their lives to the vessel, were now transmitting the last warmth to her palm through the resonance of the silverware. She knelt beside Adrian and found that on the fragment of the Holy Scripture of blood, hidden in the hidden compartment by him, her father's note was clearly visible. Type B blood is the bloodline of the first-generation experimental subjects, and the AB type half-breed can balance the virus Bella. Your blood is both the key and the lock. In the distance, Leonardo's sneer came. At the entrance of the underground palace, the pupils of the mechanical hounds were reflecting the diary in her hand. Adrian. She shook his shoulder but found a strange smile on his lips, the same expression he had when he looked at the sarcophagus in chapter 17. Following his gaze, Isabella saw that the silver block on the forging platform was melting, and half of the star chart of the Notre Dame underground palace was buried inside. Next to the Arctic coordinates was written, "On the winter solstice of 1897, the blood of the vessel will either freeze the Arctic or ignite the world." The moment the sharp teeth of the mechanical hound tore through the air, Isabella stabbed the silver dagger into the ground. The ashes of Charlotte resonated with her blood, drawing a huge rose emblem on the laboratory floor. Adrian took the opportunity to tear off the cross around her neck, revealing the fragment of the reliquary left by her mother, the last hope of stabilizing the virus that her father had desperately hidden in her birthmark in 1890. "They're coming," Adrian coughed, and blood foam splashed on the last page of the diary. "Find the silverware craftsmen of the White family. Their blood can hear the heartbeat of the virus, ... double quotes." His voice suddenly disappeared, and his pupils reflected the bloody liquid behind Isabella. The liquid avatar of the first-generation prince was crawling into the laboratory along the underground sewer. Isabella grabbed the diary and the silver dagger. The moment before the phantom of the prince touched Adrian, she shattered the dome of the underground palace with the blood resonance. The falling rose window glass formed a North Star chart on the ground. She finally saw clearly the last sentence in the diary, reddened by blood. "Bella, the handle of Adrian's silver dagger hides the fragment of the reliquary that can kill the first-generation prince. That's the last bit of humanity that Charlotte forged for you with her ashes." This issue ends here. The next issue will be even more exciting. Subscribe as soon as possible.